Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Melissa.
I'm Brad.
And today we're going to talk about something a little more serious on the wellness spectrum and share with you our personal experiences that we both recently went through and talk about grief.
Yes, but first, the intro.
Welcome back to Fitness Forever TV,
Your source for entertainment television,
where we explore all things health and wellness to help you achieve longevity and vitality.
Right.
Yes.
So as Em said, we are going to share with you our personal experiences with grief. I recently lost my grandmother of 98 years. And
yes.
Em?
And I recently went through the unexpected loss of my uncle, combined during a very difficult time. So our experiences we share to camera with you, and hopefully our feedback on how we dealt with these emotions, how we were coping, and how we moved through these feelings will help you if you are in a place where you are yourself dealing with grief and loss.
So let's take a look at that right now.
All right. Hey guys, I'm really excited to share with you my recent experience with loss and grief. You'll have to excuse me if I seem a little nervous or awkward talking to camera, but it's something that's very personal, and sharing it in this format is something that's kind of new to me. So anyways, it's all a part of our wellness fitness journey in life, and I want to share that experience with you in order to help maybe you deal with the feelings that you're going through with loss in your life. Now, just recently I did lose my uncle unexpectedly, and when you lose someone unexpectedly, I think it's shocking. I mean, losing someone that you love in your life is always going to be a painful, heartfelt, heart-aching experience. But when you don't see it coming, I think it really it makes you question your own mortality. And I think that's part of that grieving process, is being face-to-face with those things. So this is what happened. This was just in early December, and I was driving to work to train clients at like 5 in the morning, and I got a phone call from my sister-in-law, Jenny. Now, my sister-in-law, Jenny, lives in Jacksonville, where my aunt and uncle live. And, you know, getting a call from her at 5 in the morning is always very disconcerting. That's not a normal time that we speak, but she had called me to inform me that our uncle had passed away unexpectedly. Now, just to give you some background into my family history, my mom and dad and my uncle and aunt built their lives here in the United States together. I'm first generation American, and they came over from the Philippines to build a beautiful life for myself, my brother, and my cousins. So we're talking about the pillars, the cornerstones of our family, my mom and dad, my uncle, and my aunt. Now, during this time too, December was a very tremendously emotionally challenging month. So I get hit with this news that my uncle passed away unexpectedly. And at the same time, my father had been is going through his battle against lung cancer. And at the time, my parents happened to be in Jacksonville for my dad's follow-up appointment at the Mayo Clinic. So the night that my uncle passed away unexpectedly, my parents were also in Jacksonville, coincidentally. So knowing that we had lost my uncle, I not only was grieving his loss, but I was thinking about the loss that my aunt was going through, and that my mom was going through, and that my dad was going through. You know, my aunt and uncle, they have a beautiful family, 5 children, many grandchildren. You know, his legacy lives on. And in regards to his relationship with my mom and dad, those, you know, like I said, they built their lives here together, and that was my dad's best friend. And at the time, with what my dad had been going through with his recent lung surgery to remove cancer from his lungs, he was unable to speak because of the fluid in his lungs, and he was dealing with a lot of coughing. So when I was thinking about my uncle and feeling the sadness of the loss, and feeling the sadness for my aunt and my mom and my dad, and feeling the helplessness my father must have felt in not being able to truly express how he felt because he himself was going through something very challenging, it just broke my heart. And I was also very concerned with my mom, who'd been pulled in two very hard directions. One, taking care of my father during this time, and then with her sister and the loss of her brother-in-law. So knowing that my mom was very stressed out in regards to, not sleeping well, thinking about my father and taking care of him, and now with her sister, her best friend, losing her husband, her brother-in-law, my mom's brother-in-law, and the foundation of history that they have together, the immense grieving and pain was tremendous. So I think those are all normal things that people feel, and it's how we process those things that we, overcome. Now, the services for my uncle, the silver lining in that was that it brought all of my cousins together from New York, Canada, all around Florida. We all came together to celebrate my uncle's life. And I think one of the things that was really moving, that was something that I've never traditionally experienced myself, is that during the funeral services, we sang Frank Sinatra's My Way, which is my uncle's favorite song. And I know that funeral services, it's a time where families get together and they honor the memory of the one that has passed. And for me, though, thinking about that made me sad after the funeral, because at this point, everyone's disbanded. Everyone's gone back to their homes. And now my aunt's left sitting alone in her home without my uncle. Granted, she's got wonderful children who've been a great support network for her, but just to imagine that loss and that hole in your life was, I feel so sad for that part of her life that is missing, that has been there every single day. Now, processing these feelings, how was I coping? How was I processing that and dealing with that? There are a couple things. One, it was an unexpected loss, and as shocking as it was, sometimes when I look at that, I'm somewhat thankful because it wasn't prolonged. He wasn't suffering in regards to long-term health issues. And I think about the positive things. He left a legacy, wonderful children who have been very successful in their lives professionally and personally, and the legacy of grandchildren that he left behind that love and adore him. And I started thinking about sadness and grief and how do we get through those things, And I think one of the things that I learned, that I processed, was that if we spend our time in that space of sadness and grief and loss and despair, we eventually drown out the memory of what was good and what we loved and what we cherished. And that's not something that person, your loved one, would have wanted. Yes, it's perfectly normal to feel sad and to feel loss, tremendous loss. But if we stay in that mindset, I feel that the positivity that person had brought into our lives, that memory is dulled a little bit if we are caught in a vortex of sadness. And not to say that, it's self-indulgent to be sad and to mourn loss, but I think it's important to process those feelings in order to remember those positives and the good things that the person left behind in our lives, despite there being a physical hole there, not having that person's warm body there next to you every single day. Their memory should live on inside your spirit and soul. And it's so much easier to say those things, I know, but we can't forget the good, and I think it comes down to gratitude. We have to be grateful for the time that we've had with our loved ones, and we have to be grateful for the joy and the love that they brought us. And if we spend our time mourning the loss and being sad and crying and full of despair, we let those things overshadow the joy and the happiness that that person had brought us. So I think in regards to coping with grief and sadness, it circles back to gratitude. And for me, that's helped me process the loss of my uncle in my life. And it's made me appreciate even more so the people who I love and hold dearly in my life. So that being said, I'll just leave you with something that I learned recently. And the saying goes, grief is love with nowhere to land. And at the time of being super sad about my uncle, which I still am, that really hit close to me. However, knowing that that saying says grief is love with nowhere to land, I think that's not true. There was a landing space for that love, and it still carries on. And it's with gratitude and appreciation of that person and their memory that will help us move forward with coping with loss. And as hard as that seems, as difficult as it is, it's a good way to move on and to focus on the positive versus the self-wallowing sadness, because that's not something that person would have wanted for you. So hopefully sharing my personal experience in this really awkward format for me will help you maybe get through any kind of grief or loss that you may be feeling. So that being said, thanks for letting me share, and I hope that this helps someone out there. And I think actually talking through it myself kind of helps me out too. So thanks. Talk to you guys soon.
Hey guys, it's B, and I wanted to share my story of grief and loss. I recently lost my grandmother. She was 98 years old, so a little bit different than M's story, which M's was a little bit more abrupt. Wasn't expecting it as much. And while we were not expecting it as soon, we still were expecting it. So it was a little bit different. My grandmother was devoted to her family. And she was devoted to my grandfather. They were married 75 years before he died, at 94, which was 6 years ago. And she never really came out of that. So the last few years has been her in a home, and my mother and my aunt taking care of her, making sure that she had what she needed going forth. Now the interesting thing is that she was healthy physically. Mentally was a different story. Like I'd mentioned, she never really got over the death of my grandfather. And while she had a good support system, that was her whole life. So just to let you know, my grandmother met my grandfather when she was 15. And they actually weren't allowed to date until she was 19. He was 17 when he met her, and obviously 22 when they finally were able to start dating. And then they got married soon afterwards. So this was really the only man that she ever dated, had been with in her whole life. So you can imagine the feeling of loss that she felt 6 years ago when my grandfather died at 94 of congested heart failure. They did everything together. And my grandfather retired at 55. So obviously they were still together another 40 years after he retired. So they never really spent that many nights apart from each other. So you can imagine what that did to my grandmother, especially when she was he was her whole world. So this took a toll, and this ultimately led to her passing. I was happy that I was able to see her at Thanksgiving, and I pretty much had said my goodbyes at that point. So that was obviously a lot different circumstance. Still, it hits. These were people in my life that I was very close to. Growing up, I was so excited when my mom would say, "Your grandparents are coming in for the weekend," or "Your grandparents are coming to stay for a week," or, "Oh, we're going off to see your grandparents." That was the highlight of my childhood, is when I knew my grandparents were coming in. They had lived about 6 hours away, so it wasn't, too terribly far, but for a kid, it's forever. So I was so excited when they would come in and they were staying over and we'd have breakfast together. And all those memories are very clean in my head, no matter how long ago they were. So this woman was everything to me, and my grandfather was everything to me. So it really was still kind of tough to go through. But how I dealt with it, I did it in two different ways. One was I focused on my mother. And while this was my grandmother, and while this was, a woman I knew my whole life and who I loved and cherished, um, it was my mother's mother, the woman that gave birth to her. So I wanted to focus on making sure that my mother was okay. And I know that my mother holds in some emotions. So I was very concerned that she would not process. So I focused on her. Then, when it was time for the funeral, I flipped a switch. I went into, let's celebrate her life and not mourn her death. A lot of times easier said than done, right? But that's how I started my eulogy. I was given the task to speak about my grandmother, and I did. And I even started with, "Hey, why is everybody so somber? This is a celebration of life." And I think that's what she would wanted. She would have wanted us to celebrate her life, not mourn her death. And so that's what we ended up doing. And I think by me being able to flip that switch, it helped me deal a lot better. Now, there's certain techniques, obviously, to get through this, and I can tell you as a fitness professional, we've heard it all before. Get moving. Don't lie in bed and dwell on it. Get moving. Do things. And that's so much easier said than done. It's right, because obviously studies have been shown as you move, endorphins move through the body, it makes you feel better. But, mentally it's still rough. But no matter how long that you had with this person, if you're going through it right now, think about the time that they spent here, not the time that they are missing out on. Think about all the things they've done and the impact they made on this world, rather than what the impact they're not going to make. And focus on the good times. And surround yourself with the love and support of your family. And journal. We've said it a few times, but it really does help. Write your feelings down. And then reread them. So I hope that some of these things and one of my experiences can help you if you're in the middle of a loss and some grief, and or something that maybe you'll remember if something happens in the future, which I sincerely hope it doesn't. So thank you very much for listening. I appreciate you allowing me to share, and we'll see you back at the studio. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That was pretty powerful.
Yeah, well, no, thank you for sharing, Brad. I mean, it sounds like your grandmother had a full and robust life, and for that, we have a lot of gratitude for.
Yeah, yeah. I feel bad for your family because obviously when something happens that's abrupt, it kind of takes its toll a little bit more.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it's a different kind of grief, but it's something that we're all working through, and hopefully
Yeah.
the things that we've shared with you and our personal experiences will help you if you find yourself in a similar situation. It's really important to surround yourself with a strong network of family and friends who are there for you. But if there is a case where that just doesn't feel like it's enough, there are resources such as the Grief Anonymous national network, and you can find them online on Facebook or at griefanonymous.com. If anyone out there has additional resources or ways of coping or you'd like to share with us, please, leave us a comment and let us know ways that possibly could help other people work through their emotions and their time of loss.
Yeah, but as she said, it's very, very important that you surround yourself with positive, positive influences such as your support group. So check out griefanonymous.com. Check them out on Facebook. And on a lighter note, don't forget we're still gathering quotes at motivate.fitnessforever.tv. And we'll go ahead and we'll link that down in the description along with the link to Grief Anonymous. And that should do it for us for this week.
Yeah, so you guys stay motivated, stay fit, stay healthy, stay happy, and we will see you guys next week.
Take care.